Friends, it's Sarah here from Sunset Bow, and I am doing a response to a hashtag that was started by Simon from the Hermit's Cave, and the hashtag is My First Tarot. And interestingly, I've done another video really recently, as in within the last week, talking about how the decks I thought were my first tarot decks were not actually my first tarot decks, which is a realization that I just came to really recently. And I've also talked before about how I don't fully remember what exactly it was that brought me to tarot in the first place. I don't remember what the inspiration was at that moment that made me think, you know what, I want to go out and I want to buy a tarot deck. And I thought I would talk a little bit about the reasons for that and kind of what was going on with me back when I first got into tarot, and what has sort of resulted in me just recently realizing that the decks that I thought were my first tarot decks were not actually my first tarot decks, and it was actually something different. So I got into tarot back in around 2003. And the thing that you need to know about what was going on with me back in 2003, and this is actually something I've never discussed on my channel before, I was in law school back then. I am actually a lawyer by training. I'm a licensed attorney. And I don't practice today. I work now in legal publishing. But from the years 2000 to 2004, actually, I was in school, and I was doing law school, and I was also doing a master's degree in another subject at the same time. So as you can imagine, it was a really, really stressful time for me. And as a result of the stress that I was under from school, I had a tendency to sort of develop outside of obsessions with various weird projects. I had all kinds of stuff that I became interested in that I suddenly decided that I was going to become totally obsessed with and do a whole bunch of research on. And tarot was one of those things. Other weird projects that I had at the time included, I ended up researching the entire life of a author that I was really interested in, and checking out every book that there was about her in existence, and every article from the university library that I had access to as a result of being in school. So that happened. I also got very involved in Harry Potter at the time and sort of started checking out a bit of the online Harry Potter fandom. So that was another sort of odd outside project that I had. And then also I developed an interest in tarot. And so, you know, there was just a lot going on with me, and it's really funny for me to think back on those times, because a lot of the day-to-day of what was going on with me, I don't actually remember. I don't actually remember what inspired me to do any of those things. I don't remember what made me think, oh, I need to buy a tarot deck. I don't remember what made me think, oh, I'm going to check out every single book that there is in existence about Lucy Maud Montgomery and research every facet of her life. I don't remember what it was that made me say, oh, you know, I'm going to read the Harry Potter books and now become completely obsessed with Harry Potter. Like, it was this sort of weird, a kind of distancing exercise, I suppose, where I was so stressed out by school, and I was spending so much time focused on school and just being completely overwhelmed by it all the time, that I felt like I needed to have some kind of outside interest, and it was almost a way of sort of distracting myself from the stress that I was under as a result of school, to do something that instead, you know, took the same level of kind of mental commitment, but wasn't related to what I was doing in school. And so, you know, most of those interests that I developed when I was in school kind of remain to this day. I'm still pretty obsessed with Harry Potter. Obviously, I still read tarot. I still have an entire, like, 2 shelves worth of books on Lucy Maud Montgomery on my shelves. It was the era of Sarah and weird projects, basically. And, you know, I just, again, because of the stress I was under, so much of what my day-to-day life was like back then, I really, really don't remember. I can look back and realize that, you know, there are like apartments that I would live in for an entire year, and I just don't have a memory of what it was like to live there. I don't have any specific memories of using the kitchen or, being in the bedroom or what the bathroom looked like. It's just so weird how, because my brain was so full of school stuff, that time is really almost a blur to me. But so as a result of that, it was so weird recently when I realized that what I thought was my first tarot deck was not actually my first tarot deck. And I'll put a link to that video up in the little bubble up at the top here, because I literally just did that video like a week ago. But so my first tarot was actually Legend, the Arthurian Tarot by Anne Marie Ferguson. And again, I don't remember specifically why this is the one that I bought. And you'll notice too, I literally just got this recently, but I actually have already trimmed it. And I like it better now that it's trimmed. It's quite small, but the cards pop a lot more without the borders on them, and they're already sort of a very pale color. So I do like that. And you'll see that I wrote on the bottom in my horrible handwriting, but it's fine. I can deal with it. But so I realized that this was actually my first deck. But at the time, as I recall, I really couldn't read with it. I bought this one first because I also love Arthurian legend. That was another one of my weird projects at the time. Sort of outside studies, independent studies that I would embark on to distract me from school. But as I recall, I really couldn't read with this deck because it was just, not knowing anything about tarot, it was too difficult to connect these stories to the concepts from tarot, because I wasn't familiar enough with the concepts from tarot to really understand what the connection was. And so, so I had this deck. I have no recollection whatsoever of what I did with it. I don't know if I gave it to somebody or if I sold it or what I did. But that was actually my first tarot deck. And it ended up, obviously, not being a really kind of great experience. And that was sort of when I realized that rather than, kind of deciding what deck would be best for me based on, what I was most attracted to in terms of artwork or in terms of story or in terms of other themes behind the deck, that it was better to do a little bit of research and get more of a basic deck, more of like a Rider-Waite-Smith based deck. And so as I recall, what I did was go on Eclectic Tarot, which, is a great site that's been around forever, obviously. And even back in the day, 15 years ago or more than 15 years ago now, it existed, and it gave some recommendations as far as beginner decks and sort of Rider-Waite-Smith clones and pictures and all that kind of thing. And so when I knew I had to get a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, I got a couple of different options for that. So I did get, actually, let's look at this one first. I did get specifically a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and I got the Radiant Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I also got the Universal, but I preferred the coloring on the Radiant because it was brighter. So this is one of the very first decks that I had that I actually attempted to learn tarot with and read with. It's a great deck, but what I found was that I didn't connect to it as much as I connected to a different one, which is the Robin Wood deck. And the Robin Wood deck is the one that I really realized helped me to understand, what the concepts truly were. And really, this is the deck that I honestly learned with and that I read with for a very long time. It is a really wonderful deck. The artwork is really beautiful. It isn't my favorite type of artwork anymore, and I really don't read with this deck anymore. But in terms of developing an understanding of what all of the different concepts truly meant, this deck was really the one that got me to the point where I really felt like I understood the Rider-Waite-Smith system and I could truly do a tarot reading for myself or for others. And so for a long time, this really was my main deck. And so, this is truly the deck that got me to the point where I felt like I could continue in my studies and really sort of grow and develop as a tarot reader. And that's what's gotten me to where I am today. It's now over 15 years later, a couple dozen decks later, that I use that I actually use as opposed to this deck, but this is a deck that I'll always keep because it is really special to me in that it is the one that really, you know, despite not being my actual first deck, it's the one that I actually first read as tarot and made me really truly understand how to read tarot. So that's the story of my first tarot. Again, you know, official first deck was this one, was the Arthurian Tarot, Legend the Arthurian Tarot by Anna Marie Ferguson, which I just rebought for myself just super recently. And again, I'll put a link to that video up. But when you think about what my real first deck was in terms of the first deck that I actually learned to read with, even though it wasn't the first one I actually bought, it was this one, which is the Robin Wood. And you know, it's so funny to me how I have such a hard time remembering so much from that time because it was so stressful. But that tarot is something that has carried through with me in the subsequent years in such an important way. And so, you know, despite the kind of misery that law school put me through, I am grateful to it for weird things. And one of the weird things is how many things that had nothing to do with law school it made me become obsessed with. And tarot is one of those things. So anyway, that's the story of my first tarot. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Simon for starting the hashtag. It's really fun to think about this stuff and sort of think back on, you know, what drew you to specific interests or projects. And in this case, it was literally just something I did to distract myself from the absolute craziness that was graduate and law school. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.